Hello everyone, my name is Thad McCracken, and this is your Psychoactive sermon number 3, Ensnared by the Gaze of the Acid Christ. Let's do this thing. So, the reason I picked that title is, one, it relates to a story in my life, which is about how I finally came to terms with organized religion after being, felt like I was manipulated and betrayed by it in my past. And I think, Dean Radin has a good point. I was listening to him on a podcast a while ago when he said that I think a lot of hardcore atheists, like, that is the primary motivation for atheism, is this primal anger from your childhood that religion betrayed you. And I understand that better than anyone. I grew up in the church and I got older and I stopped. What's funny about it is I lost the ability to believe in it. I don't have a brain that's capable of not asking critical questions and just allows me to have this blind faith that Christians would love you to have, which is what I love, something that Christian proselytizers never acknowledge, that maybe there are people that literally don't have the ability to believe in such a simplistic way of viewing the universe through a spiritual lens. And so, again, but if you're familiar with my lectures and my writing, there's one thing that I've talked about before, and that's that I think we're spiritually retarded as a species. I mean, spiritually retarded, and I know that's kind of an insensitive term, and I'm using it for comedic effect. But retarded, the PC term for that, and I know because I actually worked with developmentally disabled adults for years. I know it's a rough joke, but anyways, it's developmentally disabled. And that's, I think, a good way to look at what's happened with humanity and spirituality. Our development spiritually has been disabled. It's been retarded. And when I say that, I mean, like, if you want to know about physics, the answer to that question is not, oh, hey, someone wrote a book about physics 2,000 years ago, so go read that book over and over again. If you wanted to be a fucking hockey coach, and no one would say, oh, hey, the best way to learn the new hockey best hockey coaching techniques would be to read a book about hockey that was written 60 years ago and just keep reading that over and over again. There is no aspect of our society where the way that we behave towards spirituality in regards to religion makes sense. And yet, we just allow this, and very few people, I mean, more people call bullshit on it angrily, but it's still such an institution, and I love when I see stories about the decline of organized religion, because I just laugh. Because when you're reading the fine print in the articles, what it is saying is that 80% of people, at least in America, I guess it's declining way quicker in the UK, are religious. And in another 10 years that might be down to like 77.9 or something. Like, religion is not going away anytime soon. And on top of that, 80% of fucking people, that's a lot. That's the vast majority of people. And not all these people are evil assholes. So thinking of it in black and white terms of good and evil and right and wrong isn't a good thing. But simultaneously, as an occultist and someone who's more into the occult or shamanism, you have to acknowledge that these people hate you. As someone like Dan Savage points out in regards to, gay people, is that people of the more shamanic or occult faith, it's like these religious people fucking hate us. They think we're in league with Satan. They made shamanic leagues fucking illegal. That's how superstitious these people are, and so when I write about how psychedelic drugs could revolutionize religion, it's just like, well, isn't that partially why religious people banded together and made them illegal in the first place? Is because they sort of knew that on an unconscious level, And so there's like 10 movies coming out right now about anti-witchcraft, there's like a witch hunter movie, and there's all these things on TV where, it's totally okay to go around and murder witches, It's like, this is a legit, religious practice. Like, this is so culturally insensitive, and unlike gay rights or trans rights, which is a huge thing now with Caitlyn Jenner, there are no witch rights. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. There's no occult rights, so we have to start fighting back. People with alternate viewpoints, and it's interesting because there's provisions based in the Constitution. We live in a country that's founded on religious freedom, right? And we don't we don't have religious freedom. We've made a good shamanic practice illegal. You know, if you practice the occult, you have to kind of do it under the dark. Now weed's being legalized, so at least, you know, a basic sacrament of sex magic has now been legalized, which I seem to be one of the few people pointing out. But, you know, religion, it's getting dangerous, and that's the other thing. We have to start acknowledging that, you know, we did in fact double the size of the war machine in the last 15 years because of religion, and that is fucking insane, because that goes completely against the teachings of Christ. Like, I've read the entire Bible. Like I said, we used to just read the Bible in Sunday school when I was a kid. I've read the whole fucking thing. The teachings of Christ are good teachings. They're sound. They come from a sound spiritual place. And what we've done, and this should concern religious people, with spending an increasing amount of money killing people and selling out to corporations, this is not in tune. You know, Jesus Christ never really said anything about gays or abortion, but, you know, he had some pretty harsh words for opulent wealth. And that's sort of undeniable. So the current state of religion, it's crazy. And as occultists, we need to start fighting back, but we need to, you know, people don't respond to, you know, just hostility that the atheist crowd brings, you know, but I respect the atheist crowd as much as the atheist crowd, we forget, especially in Britain, which is declining again in the popularity of religion, is declining less fast over there. The atheist movement with like Hitchens and Dawkins, that was largely inspired by Bush's warmongering. You know, it was this realization that, oh shit, you know, we can't just say anything, you know, sit back and not say anything about religion anymore. And what I'm saying is religion is completely irrational. I dislike it for a lot of reasons, but those guys were such harsh dicks. And, you know, atheism, in my mind, the weird thing is the more I've gotten into shamanism and studied different occult practices, the more I've realized that that this hatred for religion that people have, it's not productive anymore, and that atheism is actually more fundamentally off than Christianity is. In my mind, I think it's more correct to think that the spiritual world, or it's to view life as some sort of morality judgment for the future of your soul, is in whether you get to ascend to a higher realm of consciousness, rather a lower realm of consciousness, is a fundamentally somewhat accurate way of looking at the world, whereas atheism, that, you know, there's just nothing there, you're just completely ignoring near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and all kinds of other men. You're just saying, that's not real because that threatens my ego. But let's face it, Christianity has been a far more destructive influence on society, also possibly a beneficial influence on society as well. But I do, on a fundamental level, after pursuing things like the occult and chaos magic and astral projection, it has actually led me to realize that Christianity is based, in my mind, on things like astral projection in the first place, which I never would have expected at all. Like, I grew up, you know, after I rejected Christianity, I thought this shit was fucking batshit, and it weirded me out when I started having these experiences indicating to me, like, well, you know, the fundamental tenets of, you know, the judgment of the soul and angelic versus demonic not overseers, but entities that are, you know, kind of manipulating the scenes behind our reality. And that, you know, life is a test to attain godhood, you know, and it is a morality test, and I've had experiences indicating this to me as well. So there are, you know, I think Christianity is almost like more right than atheism. But back to us being spiritually retarded, and this is what's so fucking weird, is after I rejected Christianity, I tried a bunch of different, you know, I've now tried at least 4 different really weird spiritual practices that not really a whole lot of people did. I mean, the first, psychedelics, a lot of people do that. I've since started using psychedelics ritualistically and recreationally, and then ritualistically. And I can definitely say when you really focus on using psychedelics ritualistically, it's certainly a different experience than using them recreationally. And I would recommend thinking about trying that to anybody. So that's the one spiritual thing that I tried first. I did that when I was 18. It completely blew my mind. I was staring into the face of hyper-intelligent, rapidly mutating art, some kind of super soul that was unbound by the parameters of time and space that our bodies impose upon us. And the first thing I ever, the first time I ever took mushrooms, I had this experience where I sort of knew that death wasn't the end of existence. It was just like, literally, one of the first things that happened. I stared out into the water, and I was on the beach, and I just had this vision that, if it sounds morbid, but it was the 90s, and I was an angry young angst dude, because that's what was being marketed to us at the time, and so I had this vision of walking out into the water, and like, what if I drown myself? And I just knew there was this understanding of, if you did, your consciousness would continue after death. You're only in a small, it's like this complete understanding. So first time I ever took mushrooms, this is like one of the first experiences I ever had. And isn't that what religion is supposed to do? It's supposed to alleviate your fear of death. Isn't that the point to spirituality? And so mushrooms did that one fucking time, once. Try, and it's like, obviously I didn't only do them once, but the first time I ever tried that, I had that experience. And so that led me to astral projection. Astral projection, it's the idea that you can use tapes and literally detach your body from your soul. Did that. Played around with it for a while, and guess what? It worked too. This sounds like the craziest thing. Again, when you do this, you realize, how do we not know about these things? And again, it comes back to God's conspiracy in the book of Genesis. It's like, we're not supposed to. Like, there was a point, like, God put some kind of fucking curse on us to make us ignorant to these things. So again, astral projection worked. Years later, I started trying chaos magic, kind of a more psychedelic, hash-based version of chaos magic. That works too. And then most recently, I've been trying dream journaling, and I've been doing that, kind of social media dream journaling, or magic journaling, which is even weirder. And you'll see as my new book comes out, the more I went and started doing that and reading through that, I was realizing that I was actually predicting the future, my own future, on a quite demonstrable level. And when this book is out, I urge you to look at it, because it's pretty fucked up. So here's 4 things that I've tried. Psychedelic drugs, chaos magic, astral projection, and then now dream journaling. All 4 of those things worked. Christianity, did it for 10 years, did all the rituals. I was an altar boy, said the Lord's Prayer every night. I was probably praying to get laid, which is pretty hilarious. And guess what? It didn't, it didn't fucking work. I never got that impression. So again, this lack of understanding that we have for spirituality is so profound. And again, this is just another example. I've tried 4 things that all worked, all gave me made me a more spiritual person. I felt gave me spiritual insight. And the one thing that I did for 10 years, and that I can resoundingly say didn't really do anything. And that's the most popular thing in our society. Tons of people go to church every week and say the Lord's Prayer every night, and very few people try chaos magic, and very few people try astral projection, and very few people try dream journaling, like just basic stuff like that. These are all things that people don't really try, and I don't think people really try ritualistically using hallucinogens either. So anyways, I'm gonna try and move this along. Part of the reason that, though, I did want to bring this up is because there is a story in my book, The Galactic Dialogue, which there is a link down there if you want to grab it. Super cheap on Amazon. You can download it for $3. And another reason I wanted to address religion. Every time, if you are someone of an alternate spiritual persuasion, and you start trying to hawk your book, you're going to see people in the comments of any website you're on, like, crying fucking foul, like, oh, this dude's just trying to sell a book. It's like, dude, I don't make that fucking much money selling books. I have a fucking day job. That's not how I make my living. I would love to make my living doing that, but you're missing the larger point. There's a church on every fucking corner. I live in a neighborhood in Seattle called Ballard, where there was literally a law when it was built that you had to build a certain amount of, it was into the zoning, you had to build a certain amount of churches per residence. So, there's churches all over the place, and these are businesses. They do fine, they make money, and so if I wanted to talk about spirituality in the context of a church, I could do that. That could be my day job, right? But if I want to talk about it in the context of the occult, like, the best I got right now is hawking books. Like, I'm going to be working on, trying to mirror religions, and, hopefully in the future, and see how they're making money, and trying to honestly move in that direction. But I at least wrote a fucking book about spirituality, and I didn't, I wrote a book. I didn't reinterpret, and I got another one coming out. I didn't reinterpret a book from 200 years ago and do the same rituals that I could easily get paid for. I actually have a relative who has his own church and makes money doing that. And it's a super conservative. It's a relative through my wife, and yet it's like, if I was willing to play the game and you know, be a Christian and start my own Christian church, like, or Muslim or Judaism, you know, there's institutions that they're set up. I can make that into a job. So please donate and actually buy my book so I can maybe eventually get to the point. But just keep in mind every time you're looking at a New Age person and scolding them for, you know, trying to hawk books, that, you know, one, at least that person wrote a book, and two, how are you supposed to make money as a spiritual person if you don't exist within the church? You know, that's the problem. That's what we need to figure out. It's like every time you're bitching about this New Age person that's trying to make money hawking books, look up the street and look at these mega churches and look at how much money those people are fucking raking in. You know what I'm saying? They're rarely making that kind of money. So anyways, that rant obviously had a lot to do with my anger towards Christianity. I do find it fascinating too. I can't say, I did grow up in the 90s, and you know, there was popular bands in the 90s, and I don't know if you really have platinum selling bands these days that are writing songs about what a bunch of bullshit Christianity was, but you know, back in the day we had Ministry and Soundgarden and Nine Inch Nails, and you know, a lot of bands just completely trashing organized religion and music, and so, you know, that art influences consciousness and who you are as a person. And when I was younger, growing up in that time period, I was the quintessential, like, fucking, you know, angry young fucking dude. And when I started realizing that I didn't really have the ability to believe in religion anymore, I became very, very, you know, aggro and fuck religion. And I was like that for quite some time. And the story of how that actually turned around for me is pretty bizarre. And it's actually how I developed a personal relationship with Christ. Yes, by pursuing the occult. It gets such a bad name. So what happened was I was actually, first off, one of the first times I ever like kind of had like an acid sex ritual. It was before I was conceptualizing it in that way. But you know, essentially me and my girlfriend at the time took acid and we got a bunch of beer and we had a bunch of sex. And at the time, again, I don't know if you know, if you're familiar with, there was a hipster thing probably going around late 90s, I'd be early 2000s at that point because I live in Seattle, where people were making like Irony Jesus bathrooms. And I did that. And so my girlfriend and I actually got all these things from the thrift store. And so even though neither one of us were a Christian, we like filled our bathroom with all this religious imagery. So this one time, you know, probably right after, you know, having sex and fucking tripping super hard on acid, I come out and I don't know how, but this picture of the weeping Christ just ensnared me. It was, you know, super weird. I literally like just became fixated on it, and I stared at this like it was sending me some kind of, you know, profound telepathic communication directly into my spirit, and so I was just sitting there, and you know, I went off to like go to the bathroom and grab a beer or something, and eventually my girlfriend at the time came out and she was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm just like sitting in the middle of the hallway just staring at this image of the weeping Christ. You know, for some reason, I don't know, something about this image of the weeping Christ just tore into my soul and was communicating to me something that I didn't understand. And so years later, probably 4 or 5 years later, I had just been kicked out of a band, which is a very weird story. I was in a band called the Nemesis Theory for 4 years, and essentially, I mean, it's classic band shit. You know, I was younger and I don't know about bands, but there's dealing with egos in bands. Like I signed on with this band. I moved to Seattle. I really wanted to be in a band. They wanted me to just be a vocalist. I'm really probably a better guitar player than I am a vocalist and a songwriter. And so this was always frustrating for me, you know, just being a vocalist. Although I do think it was good for my writing in the long term, weirdly enough. So I was just a vocalist, and there was tons of tensions in this band. So to make a long story short, this band ended up kicking me out and not telling me about it. So I thought, after all these years of tension about me wanting to play guitar, me and the guitar player finally had a competition, and I was just like, you know what, dude, I'm really unhappy with not being able to play guitar in this band or write songs. And you know, he was just like, well, you know, he pretended to quit. That's what happened. So I thought that the band broke up because this guy quit, and then I found out about 4 months later that rather than the band breaking up and because this guy quit, what actually happened is, rather than entertaining the idea of me like playing guitar and writing songs, they decided to get another guitar player, to get another vocalist who was way worse than me by all admission. I'm friends with all these guys now too. It's like there's really no bad blood there. So they decided to get another vocalist who was way worse than me. and just operate with him. And weirdly enough, they ended up recording an entire album with him, and he ended up quitting before they even played their album release show. So it's just a totally weird story. So anyways, the night that I had found out that I had gotten kicked out of that band for this reason, and yet I didn't have time to process it yet until the weekend. And I don't normally drink wine. I was primarily a beer drinker. I don't drink nearly as much as I used to back then. But I was primarily a beer drinker back then. And in this case, I started drinking wine. And so I was drinking wine with my wife. That's what she likes more. And so I just get increasingly drunk on wine, and I had this experience which is weirder than any experience I have ever had in my life. I've never had a weird drunken manic episode, and that's the best way I could explain it. It's that I had a drunken manic exegesis where I reimagined, I came to terms with my Christian upbringing and essentially realized how unproductive it was for me to understand, to be oppositional to Christianity, especially as somebody who likes to talk about spirituality. And more than anything, what I realized is that I do love the story of Christ. There was a reason I was going to church when I was younger. I love the story of Jesus. I flat out like it. And the reason I like it is because Jesus was a rebel. Jesus, and more than anything, what I was realizing is I have a lot in common. I can put a personal spin on the story of Christ. The story of Christ means something very particular to me because Jesus is someone who had weird spiritual experiences like me and looked at humanity and was like, what the fuck? That's the story of the money changers. He was fucking pissed, Jesus is a cool fucking guy. He was a rebel. He was pissed at the spiritual ignorance of mankind. And he stormed the temple and was like, you fucking assholes. Why are you trying to take money for spiritual shit? The shit should be free, it's in your head, And it's a warning because Jesus was so audacious with his challenges of this stuff that he got his ass killed. And so that's another important thing that I realized in this. It was how powerful, the occult is all about imagery. And the fact that our society has changed, or has embraced the imagery of the cross, is unbelievable because we're basically embracing the fact that according to the story, when a spiritual savior came, we killed his ass. And that's sort of what you're celebrating. And the weeping Christ is, of course, a way better symbol. And I think if you're going to practice a more Gnostic sect of Christianity, I would adopt that symbol. I would ditch the cross immediately because it's just a toxic symbol. And the weeping Christ is giving you empathy. What was Christ thinking when he's nailed there on the cross? You fuckers, you killed me. And the reason this all sort of came together is because me and the band, things had sort of soured because, I was trying to, help these guys be a better band, and the one guitar player in particular who had it's he had broken up with his girlfriend, who I ended up dating, by the way, all in the book. So I tried to help this guy, and it just pushed him away, and that's Jesus. He was trying to help us. He's a spiritual guy, trying to say, hey, idiots, spirituality is a lot more, glorious, and you don't understand it. And what did Jesus get for it? He got crucified. What did I get for trying to help this band? I got kicked out of the fucking band. And so somehow in the course of drinking all this wine, I had this experience where it's just, and I came to terms with it. And moreover, as a magician, I realized what a powerful, whether Jesus was real or not, he is an incredibly powerful image from a standpoint of consciousness. He lives on in so many people's minds, and I will always associate the power of the Christ now too with the all-forgiving light that people talk about in near-death experiences. There was a particular remote viewing session that I remember reading, because I read it years before, about when they remote viewed Jesus, and they got the same impression of this divine white light that's so beautiful and all-forgiven and heavenly that it just makes you weep tears of joy. And so I wept. I invoked the weeping Christ, and I just wept in this manic state for hours, and right there I hashed it out. And now I have a personal relationship with Christ. Christ means something to me. I use it sometimes. And yeah, and this is the image of the weeping Christ. As a magician, even though I'm not a Christian, I am in a way, because I use that imagery from time to time whenever things in my life come up with, I'm really frustrated with somebody, and I realize that I need to have an extra amount of compassion. I internalize the image of the weeping Christ, and I use it, and it's worked very well. There's been several situations where I've done this. Fortunately, I don't have to do this very often, but every time I've used this image, it works. Me and Jesus are bros. It's like he could forgive the motherfuckers that strung him up for the cross. Why can't I forgive, some dickbag on the internet or whatever, and so it's powerful, and I will continue to use Christian imagery as I go forward in my practice, and yeah, so this is getting rather long, but I just want to sort of wrap things up by saying, we have to come to terms with our religious roots. And as much as this has been a repressive force, and as much as it has doubled the size of the war machine, as much as it doesn't make sense, a lot of the fundamental principles are there, and we just need to transform them through the use of more Gnostic practices. I don't think that as atheists think we're just going to wipe out Christianity. I think using it as a powerful tool to help us evolve as a species is something that we really need to take on moving forward. Again, this is really long. I'm glad anyone sat through all of that, and I will talk to you soon, and I hope to hopefully do another one of these videos. And in the meantime, check my book. Also, there's a book about psychedelics which also touches on religion called Divine Spark that Disinfo put out. I have an essay in there. You should check that out as well. More coming soon, and stay surreal, my friends. I need a better catchphrase, but out.